my name is Jason Chatraw, and I'm here today with Maggie Falk, who you might better know as J. Carson Black, the best-selling author of The Shop, along with a number of other titles. We're going to be talking writing and publishing and a few things that you might want to learn from this best-selling author. Well, Maggie, we sure do appreciate you stopping by to visit with us today. First thing I want to start out with is asking you a little bit about your pen name and where that came from and what was your idea behind that.
My regular name is Margaret Falk, F-A-L-K, and I did sell a couple of books under that name. But when I couldn't sell my last book to New York after 35 rejections, and we put my books up on Amazon, I decided to just go under the name that I liked best, so I stuck with J. Carson Black.
Well, tell us a little bit about your journey into writing. How did you get interested in writing, and what did that path look like for you?
Well, really, I was just a little kid. I was surrounded by books. My mother was a writer. She sold a couple of things. Writing is kind of a difficult thing to get started in.
Oh, yeah.
So I do have a memory of my father was a school teacher, and he had test papers, mimeograph test papers, and they would staple the sheets together, and I would write on the back. And so I do remember I might have been 3 or 4 or 5. It's kind of hard to tell. I wrote my first book. I had a cover with a crayoned picture of a rabbit and a basket, and it was called The Easter Egg because that's how I spelled it. And that was my first novel, which didn't last more than a couple of scribbled pages. But.
That's great. So what about beyond that? I mean, what kind of kept you on that path, and really, maybe when was the point where you realized I'd like to do this, full time for a living?
Well, first, I just really had a passion to do it, and so I always wrote and illustrated stories, and then I wanted to write novels, and so I ended up with a whole bunch of chapter ones, and they were usually horse stories, like Stormy Mistral of Whispering Pines. And I draw a picture, and there would be this, and I'd get in about a chapter, and then I'd switch over to another horse because I want to do a black horse now. I kind of got sidetracked. I went to, in high school, I had a pretty good singing voice, and so I was in choir, and I was pretty easy to get kind of pushed one way or another. And so I ended up going for a bachelor's and a master's in music, in vocal performance, opera, studied opera, sang a few of them. Really wasn't cut out for it because it came clear to me that I don't like big cities that much. I mean, it's nice to visit, but I don't want to be there a lot. I don't like cold weather. I don't like crowds. And I have stage fright. So this is not quite for me. So I thought, well, you know what? Because I'd just gone to Graz, Austria, and I had auditioned, and then I got a throat infection, and so I came home and I thought, I really can't do this anymore. I want to do what I really want to do, and that's not get a job. But so I thought, well, if I can just hole up in my little place in the desert and write a novel, that would be wonderful. Because I thought at the time, well, you don't have to do anything. You're an author. You just stay there and you write your stuff. And of course, the whole world had changed, and you had to run out there and flog it like a performing monkey. I found that out pretty quickly. But at that time, I was reading a lot of Stephen King and Peter Straub, and I wanted to write a ghost story. I loved The Shining, and I loved their ghost stories. So I decided to write a horror novel, which I called Dark Country. And after 3 years, it sold. I was amazed, and they immediately changed the title, and then they made it. They did their own cover, and it came out, and needless to say, it didn't really rock the world. But I sold a few more to that same publisher, which is Kensington. It was kind of like being on a carousel and getting kicked off. You're on for a little while, and then they kick you off, and then you crawl back and you get back on,
Yeah.
And then they kick you off again.
So what was the point where you transitioned from trying to make it as a writer to doing this full time?
did actually make a living for a couple of years when I sold the Laura Cardinal, well, two books in the Laura Cardinal series for a pretty good deal to New American Library, Penguin New American Library. And I decided I wanted to write a really big thriller, and because every time I'd get kicked off the carousel, I would go, okay, I'm going to write, and I'm going to get better. And if I just get better, I'll get better, and then, I'll be on my way. And so I did. I think I got better. I wrote The Shop, which was a big thriller, and my husband and I both decided that if we couldn't get a top agent, then we were just nowhere. We were dead in the water. And it was just about the time that Amazon was starting to come up with ebooks. And at that time, a lot of people, including me, thought, oh, ebooks, come on, that's crazy. So right around February of 2011, Darkness on the Edge of Town went up. I don't know why. It just went up, and it stayed for a little while and went down, but it got pretty high up for police procedural and thriller even.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very nice, and so I had been wanting to broach the subject to my agent. Well, why don't we just put the book up, Shop up on Amazon and see what happens. 2 weeks at the end of March and at the beginning of April, it just took off and just started going up. I have no idea why.
Mm-hmm.
Algorithms, we weren't doing much of anything.
So you didn't want to go with a traditional publisher?
Yeah, I still don't. However, I did go with Thomas and Mercer, Amazon's imprint.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they were courting some people. They were looking for people, but I didn't wait for that. I called my agent up and I said, please try to get a deal with Thomas and Mercer. That would be the only place I'd ever go to, because they're, they own the company for one
Mm-hmm.
thing. And so I was lucky enough to get on with them. I didn't know that I would be able to get on with them, but they took The Shop and two other books. And Icon will be coming out in June 12th.
We'll talk about Icon in a minute. Well, tell me, what is your, as an author, what's your favorite element about storytelling?
Well, I thought I looked at that and I thought, oh boy, I think it's different at different times. I love setting. I'm really, I just love to be seated into a place and or in different places. I just love the feel of place. I think it informs a lot of things about the people there, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's and I love character.
Mm-hmm.
I love finding the different parts of a character and seeing them evolve. I mean, that means a lot. And I love well, plot kind of works itself out. I always start out thinking I'm going to write a relatively simple, straightforward book, and it always ends up getting complex. And I always and that's the fun part, the discovery.
Yeah.
So I like it all, but I think what I like is how a book works out. You just have to go on trust that it's going to happen, and somehow, doggone it, always does.
Yeah. Tell me about some of the writers that influence you, and some of the things about their writing that has had an impact on the way that you tell stories.
Well, now I did sell. I sold about 7 books to publishers, and so I kept trying for a long time. I kind of chased. I fell in with a bunch of romance writers, really bad influences, and so I wrote romantic suspense. I wrote historical romance. I wrote horror. I wrote kind of mystery, cozy, not really cozy, but cozy enough, and at the same time, I was reading, and when I discovered Sue Grafton, I started to see something that was so much more than what I had seen before for me, and it went more and more into crime fiction. And the one of the problems for me was always when I would write something, I never really felt challenged.
Mm-hmm.
Some things were challenging, but I never really just had that excitement of being challenged by a particular genre. When I got into crime fiction, when I started reading Michael Connelly, who I just absolutely I love, and Robert Grace.
Hmm.
And Jonathan Kellerman, love him. Sue Grafton, oh, I could name, and Lee Child.
Hmm.
Um, crime fiction thriller is really where I think I'm meant to be, and it just makes everything more challenging and more exciting for me. And I think if you're excited that way, then that helps a lot. And so Michael Connelly, I would tear his books apart. The Last Coyote, I had it. My mother told me never write in a book. But I would write all over that thing, and oh, look what he's doing here. Oh my God, I can't believe he did that. How he could manipulate a scene, and how he could, just wonderful. And I tore apart The Killing Floor by Lee Child.
Hmm.
Just went through, and I learned so much, and there's just so much to learn from these authors, and I always feel that I can't come anywhere near close, but at least I can try.
Well, I certainly think that's what most authors are shooting for, to be able to prove each time that we take a shot at writing another novel. Well, really do appreciate you dropping by and talking to us today, Maggie, and look forward to reading Icon, which will release June 12th from Thomas Mercer. Look for it on Amazon. So real quick before we go, Maggie, why don't you tell people where they can connect with you online and find out more about your writing?
So the best way to get in touch with me is on Facebook under J. Carson Black. I have the J. Carson Black author page, and I interact with people there. There's J. Carson Black, just me, too. That's pretty much it.
Well, thanks so much, Maggie. This has been a really interesting and enlightening conversation, and we look forward to reading some of your great stuff soon. Thanks.